Love that.
All right. Hello, everyone. Another day, or another week, another weekly Palantir podcast. I am here today with Matt Money and Chris. Chris's flight got canceled. Actually, 1,100 flights in the United States got canceled today. Chris, do you know why it got canceled?
No clue, man. They're trying to bullshit me and tell me it's the weather, but I went outside. It's fucking clear as day. So I'm like, whatever. Y'all can come up with whatever bullshit you want, but it was clear.
Yeah, so if we got flights canceled, so Chris unfortunately doesn't have his camera, so you guys will have to stare at me and Matt Money's beautiful faces while we're talking to him. Matt, for those who don't know, he has his own YouTube channel, has his own Twitter. I forgot Matt was coming on. I'll put his YouTube in the description while we're talking in like 5 minutes, so you guys can check it out there. And I thought Sachin was going to come on, but apparently Sachin's on a flight right now. It's just everything's a little crazy, but nonetheless, we're all here. And Matt is someone who has worked intimately with the Palantir product in his day job. Yep. So he's going to be able to talk to us a little bit about how he uses it after we talk more. Chris, Everclear says you have a face for radio anyway. So somebody's hop on idea and do a little work. So we're gonna get into it right now. As everyone said, do we guys have the same barber? Yeah, because me and Matt have the same beard.
Amit's hair is better. Amit's hair is much better.
No. Your hair's all slicked back too. My hair's like curving. Your hair is like slicked back. I love it. Have you seen Dawson's Creek?
No. I was way too young to really watch it, but
no, it was in the 1990s. It was like a teen romance in the 90s. 1998 it came out.
I'm only 31, so I would have been like 7. So
been 7.
What is the TV show? The TV
Dawson's
show
Creek.
Hour,
you ever seen it?
Yeah, I saw Dawson's Creek for like 10 minutes before I realized I'm a dude.
That shit came on Netflix like in 2020. I binged the crap out because I was so in love with the fact that they had to send notes to each other. They couldn't send Snapchats. It's so nostalgic for me. I like fucking loved it. So I binged the crap out of it. I love that show. Anyway, we're gonna start off with one big thing. Okay, Chris Patel, you made a statement about 2 days ago. The amount of messages I got about you, Chris, you got a lot of explaining to. We got to understand where you're coming from here. You made a statement that you bought puts on Palantir, not selling cash covered puts. You're buying puts. So in some way, it's bearish, and so if the price goes down, you're kind of hedging, right? You're doing something that's what a responsible investor does. If the price goes down on earnings, you at least you don't get that much pain. Now, you changed the decision. You exited your bearish puts today off the news that Palantir has increased their workforce by 25%. Obviously, that's rather bullish, one could say objectively, because that means they're growing. But you could also say that might be bearish because it's going to screw over their margins if they're hiring that many people. So what are your thoughts right now, Chris? And can you explain to us your option strategy around Palantir?
So I bought my puts earlier in the week when we had that giant run up. And what I was looking at the time was a lot of the run-ups that I saw in the meme stocks, right? So you had the HKD nonsense, the AMCs, the GameStops. So when I see things like that, I know that there's got to be some market over exuberance that's kind of like casting its way into a little bit of Palantir. Because at one point, a lot of people didn't realize, but Palantir was also categorized into the meme stock frenzy. So for me, it was like, okay, is this increase material based on company's performance or news that's out there right now? Or is it just based on random people saying, you know what, I'm going to throw money at this and ride it up. And then all of a sudden we get that downward move, right? So if you look at a lot of these meme stocks, they're pretty much like a game of musical chairs where, eventually the music's going to stop and then whoever is not in the chair is going to fall down. Now, what was good is because of that run up, the price on those put contracts wasn't that expensive. So I think Palantir was trading at 1134, 1135 that day. And the puts that I bought were around like 56, 57 cents. So at a $11 strike. So I was like, okay, if I buy these at the most, when it goes down, I'll end up breaking even from some of the stuff that I have, or not losing as much, right? So based on my assumption, I was like, you know what, it might be a good hedging strategy just to buy some puts for next week, just in case the earnings doesn't come, turns out not to be that great. Or now that we live in this world of all this indexing, if the general market takes a downturn, regardless of how Palantir does on its earnings, you could be screwed over. Palantir could have great numbers, but the market has an overall down day, just like you said, right? So what do I want to do? Well, I want to be in a position where I can capitalize on that. And so I bought some puts. Now today I changed my mind a little bit, and I sold my puts for two reasons. One, because of the news that came out that Palantir is doing its hiring. So the question that came to me automatically was, number one, why announce the hiring now? Like on a Friday right before earnings. Why not do it during earnings, saying, hey, we had a great quarter. We're going to capitalize on this upward momentum. We've got the cash to do it. Let's go for it, right? That would have kind of boosted some positivity right there. And then at the same time, I'm asking myself, what is the downside to this? Are they preparing us for a bad quarter? Saying that, hey, you know what, we don't want to announce that we have bad numbers and then at the same time announce hiring, which makes it go down even further. So it literally was such a binary thing that could have happened for us on Monday. So I wanted to make sure that I was hedged, but it could blow either way. Like if the numbers come up good and higher than what people are expecting, which might actually be the case. If you look at the earlier numbers from Cloudflare this week, they were tremendous, right? So if we have a huge run up, I didn't want to end up getting a sign have my entire put premium go to waste. So yeah, I ended up selling some of my puts. I'm riding the market along with you guys.
So you didn't lose any money selling the puts, right?
No, I broke even.
Okay, so now, is there any world in which you thought the hiring news was bearish because it's going to cut margins, so you thought could keep the puts, or how did you rationalize that?
So my logical thinking told me that if they're talking about hiring, that means that they're drumming up more business. Otherwise, why would they be hiring more people, right? We're also going to have to take a look at the roles to which they're hiring for. Are they hiring more salespeople, or are they hiring more forward deployed engineers that are going to be working with clients in order to support their businesses? So all in all, the total number is what really got me to say, okay, 1,000. That means that not in the entire 1,000 can't be all salespeople, right? A lot of them are going to be people that are going to be supporting the product itself. So when it came to that, I was like, all right, I think they're going to have good numbers. And if they do have good numbers, then, they can say, see, this is why we're doing the hiring. We just announced it last Friday, right? I do have to say one thing that's a bit bearish. Pretty much everyone thinks I'm the resident bear these days anyway, so I might as well just say it. From an industry standpoint, people are cutting back in terms of hiring and everything else. But that's mainly because a lot of the businesses are also cutting back on spend. Anytime you look at the data analytics market and stuff like this is not a core function of most businesses. This is a discretionary spend item, which means that, hey, if you're not getting absolute business value that's tangible, before you start firing people and laying people off, you're going to say, okay, let's cut back on some services. So right now, if you look at Snowflake, if you look at some of the other ones that provide data analytics, they're cutting their workloads down. They're trying to, like, every company's trying to cut back a little bit. So this way they're conserving some of their resources. So all in all, Palantir is going to be in a difficult position in terms of like trying to raise guidance unless they got some big contracts lined up and maybe possibly some big revenue recognition from the Ukraine thing. So I think there's just too much binary movement towards a positive and a negative. So I don't know. So but like I said, I'll ride with you guys. I think we'll have a decent quarter, in which case at the worst, in my opinion, we'll trade flat at $11.
Okay, Matt, your thoughts on the 25% stuff and any general thoughts before earnings?
I honestly don't think it's a really bad move to buy puts. And the reason being is I'm a long-term believer in Palantir. I'm a person that's going to be holding it in 2030 and beyond. But I do see the instability of the market here. I think we're in a very unforeseen time with respect to rising interest rates and the unloading of the federal balance sheet and everything that comes with that. Cheap money is gone. And so while the cheap money was here, we saw the meme aspect of Palantir and what that did to the share price. And we've seen what it's done ever since the memeness has gone away from the market in the mid 2021 timeframe. And to be very frank, if you were to look at what Palantir brings to the table on a cash flow from operations basis and a net income basis, after you incorporate share-based compensation and everything the like, it's not a $12 stock. It really isn't. I believe in the long term that it's a $100 stock, and I believe that in the long term it will become the company that we all believe in, competing with a lot of the other super big tech companies that we have out there. But I agree with Chris here. I think with where it's at today, in the short term, it's overvalued. But you also have to recognize that sometimes companies trade at premiums just based off the fact of the future value of the business as well. And people might actually buy into. So now that maybe all these meme investors have kind of come out in the beginning first 6 months of 2022, now an actual firm, steady foundation of believers like we have on this weekly Palantir conference call that we always have, is actually plowing into the stock. And those are going to be the firm foundation of the owners that aren't going to sell at the drop of a hat like some of those meme guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what the cool thing about the community we're building is that on earnings, if it goes down to, like, it's crazy, right? It goes down to like 8 or 7 or something. I think a lot of us are going to be happy because I know a lot of us felt a lot of FOMO, including myself when it's touching 1140, and I didn't buy at 6 because I'm like, A, I didn't have the most dry cap powder in the world. I have a lot more now. And B, I was just like, I don't want a DCA. I feel like the sky is ending, right? And granted, you're always supposed to DCA, but I think if we get an opportunity, a lot of us will harp on that opportunity again. Especially on the news of this growth. Like, you do not, as you said, you do not hire 25% more people, almost 1,000 more people because things are slowing down. So I think we are seeing some cool stuff.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thing because it's very like the way that it was described. It is a contrarian play, right? While everyone is laying people off, laying engineers off, laying software people off, laying sales people off, Palantir is hiring. Well, right now, Palantir, I feel like it's almost backed up into a corner to hire people because if you want to grow your business, right, the best thing you can do is invest when others are pulling back, right? A lot of companies are probably pulling back on incentives in order to get them to buy the product, right? It's like Snowflake. Snowflake is probably cutting back. Databricks is probably cutting back because they need to keep more money. The business decision that they've made is that they're trying to restrict their own restrict their growth because they don't feel like the investment is worth it. Palantir's market share is so low right now that when your larger competitors are out there, like really taking a step back, you should be taking a step forward. And so I think this was a very calculated move by Palantir's management, saying, you know what, while everyone is taking a step back, cutting back on things, we're going to double down and invest in our business because we believe it, right? So right now, maybe Snowflake sales reps are not going out there as much. Maybe Databricks Salesforce are not going out there as much. Maybe they're getting cutbacks on their hours. Maybe they're getting cutbacks on their commission. Palantir's like, screw that shit. Let's hire these guys. Let's hire this. Let's hire right now. Palantir is probably getting a pick of the litter in terms of employees because of all the tech companies that have laid people off. Imagine right now how many laid off employees right now are probably going to sign up with Palantir, who've got years of experience behind them, industry experience, industry connects that are just going to translate into more business.
And even if that screws, the short-term margins, I mean, it seems like they're playing the long game here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
I mean,
so
the gross margins are still so high. I mean, they're in the close to 80% for gross margin. I mean, the only thing that impacts the overall net margin when it comes to the net income piece is mostly the share-based compensation. I mean, if you're looking at cash flow from operations for the organization, it's a healthy company when it comes to cash flow from operations. The only thing that is anybody could ever point to about the health of the company is the fact that they have the share dilution of the share-based compensation, which actually in GAAP ends up coming into the net income piece.
Yeah, and that's one of the good things about Palantir is that it drums up so much business from the government side, which, believe it or not, the government rarely cuts back on spending. I've never seen the government ever cut back on stuff. They always expand on spending. Very few times will they cut back. So when it comes down to it, Palantir doesn't have to worry nearly as much as people that are more reliant on commercial players. Commercial people, because they're privately owned businesses, have to be capital efficient. The government can just print more money. Right now, the military is printing all the money they have. Like, if you look at the Pentagon slush budgets right now, the discretionary money that they have to spend, it's out of this world, considering that we have two confrontational enemies in Russia and China at the same time. If anything, Palantir Gotham is probably going to outperform the next couple of quarters while we see a possible pullback a little bit on Foundry. Not every business has the ability to do that, you know.
Right. Okay, and we're going to get into the Gotham stuff. We're going to get into the Pelosi stuff. We have a really juicy story I want to get to in a second, okay? And this juicy story is something that Chris has been talking about for a while. He was on an island when he brought this up a couple months ago. But before we get to that juicy story, we have to get to the quick sponsor of the stream, which is my new app. For everyone who's here, 178 people, thank you for being here. I just launched a new app, launched a new product. It's in the description right now. It's called Audio. We're trying to become the YouTube of audio. For all of you Palantir folks, there are daily Palantir pieces of audio content on this platform. It's called audio.io/daily Palantir. Sign up for it. Let me know what you think. Let me know what it feels like listening to audio content on this platform exclusively around Palantir. This is one of the main channels on the platform. It's all the content that I've been creating in audio format. So check it out if you are interested in Palantir content, not just on the video level, not just on the article level, but in the audio format. It's all exclusively on that platform, and you guys can check it out. And we launched it last week, and we've got some pretty good uses on the app. So it's a pretty cool product, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Now, Chris, you mentioned that there was a Palantir competitor a couple months ago, and this Palantir competitor was one of the reasons why Cathie Wood sold 37 million shares of the stock. And you did a lot of digging, and you found out that this competitor was called DataWalk. There was an article that came out this week called Palantir, Why Investors Need to Watch Out for DataWalk. Okay. And I read through the entire article, and basically Alan Greathouse, very interesting name, basically said that DataWalk is doing everything that Palantir does. They have better margins. They cost a lot less. And, they're going to eat Palantir's lunch. How do you feel as the resident bear on this podcast about DataWalk and Palantir's competition growing and potentially doing a lot of this governmental stuff for cheaper than Palantir?
I told you so. Now,
this is crazy, bro. The fact that you found this company and now it's like kind of the Palantir competitor. It's insane, right?
No, I mean, look, everyone is gonna have versions of a product out there that exists that they can deliver at a cheaper price. That's more niche, right? So the perfect example that I would give you is a Ferrari versus a Toyota, right? While everyone wants to have the newest Ferrari with all these features that can go from 0 to 100, not everyone needs a Ferrari. A lot of times people just need a Toyota, get them from point A to point B. And if you can bring up a compelling argument why people should buy your Toyota versus Palantir's Ferrari, people will say, sure, why not? Why am I going to pay Palantir $5 million, $10 million for a license and then have to do all this other stuff, where I could just go to DataWalk and they'll provide me a service that is equivalent in outcome to what Palantir is charging so much for. I'm not saying that that's going to dramatically make the Fortune 500 shift over to DataWalk, but there are definitely smaller companies, smaller agencies, even within government space, that actually see DataWalk as an alternative, in which case, guess what? They'll go with them. So right now that might affect Palantir a little bit, but I am going to take one step back and say, I don't think DataWalk is that company. It's probably Databricks. As I do more research and I look at a lot of the offerings that Databricks has, they're very similar to what Palantir has, right? And on top of it, they're executing really, really well. And they're a private company, right? So I would keep my eyes on Databricks, not DataWalk. Even though DataWalk, and it's funny because half of their presentations actually mention Palantir being a direct competitor.
Matt, any thoughts on Databricks?
I know nothing about Databricks, but the fact that, and this kind of goes back to some of the things that I listen to, whether it's podcasts or whether it's consultants or whatever, the fact that Databricks is focusing on Palantir in their investor presentations means that they're likely to fail.
Data walk.
Either one. I mean, if you're focusing on your competition, yes, it needs to be consideration. Maybe you learn from them a little bit, but you need to be focused on the product. And the product is what's actually going to get into the people's hands. So the fact that they're actually, I don't know, targeting Palantir in some sort of way means that they're focusing more on beating the competition, which they're literally just going to try to copy and imitate. At the end of the day, they need to be focused on creating their own products. I don't know anything about them though. So, I mean, I could be completely off base by that, but that's the same thing with what a lot of tech companies have done in the past. And that's why some of them never really survived and they've become more historic rather than continued to innovate like the Microsofts and the Apples of today.
So two things before Chris, you go. Sachin says Databricks has 25% of Palantir revenue and 2x the valuation. And this was my thing, Chris. I was saying on the morning stream on Monday, you said if Databricks goes public, you're selling half your Palantir and buying Databricks. They're already valued at 37 billion. If they go public, it's at least at 50 billion. So like Palantir's at 20 billion. Like, how can you walk us through how you're thinking about wanting to get into Databricks, even with the valuation that they have?
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, Databricks is growing much, much faster. They have a wider breadth of commercial customers, and they're literally being invested in by the likes of Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, and Salesforce, right? The founders there are on another level in terms of executing. All you have to do is just watch the Data Walk Summit that they had recently, and you'll understand the value proposition for what Databricks has. They're doing everything I wish Palantir was doing in order for execution. I was reading this book by Frank Slootman this week. I bought it, and there's actually two books that I got from him. One was directly talking about Snowflake. Another one was talking about more of a how to run a business, especially something like a SaaS business called Amp It Up. He just released it in January. And let me tell you something. The one key thing that I came away with from the second book that made absolute sense to me was how company founders are built for a different type of business, and then how other people are built for different types of execution, right? Very few times are we going to see the founder be the guy who does the best in terms of execution. Each one is suited towards different things. So if you look at Frank Slootman was not the founder of Snowflake. He was hired afterwards, right?
Yeah.
He was able to grow that business tremendously, right? Because he's all about execution. When you look at Palantir, they've had Alex Karp running the place for 17 years, right? The entire 17 years, even he's described himself that he's missed these industry trends, right? And when I look at that, I say, okay, how do you correct for that, right? How do we know that Alex Karp is not going to miss the next big trend? I can't trust it. I really can't. Executives sometimes they know they are who they are and they are able to capitalize on stuff. Another thing that I really liked about how Frank Slootman's approach was that they have a very streamlined approach in terms of dealing with new products and new ideas. Everyone, like literally the smallest person at the ground at Snowflake can go up to the top and go right to them and say, hey, listen, I think your idea is stupid. I think this idea is better. And what ends up happening is people will actually listen to that person and they'll actually make a business decision based on that feedback. One of the things that's been negative about Palantir is that when I look at some of the reviews that I see on Glassdoor, and I also look at some of the stuff on Blind, it seems that these guys have this almost like the siloed structure even among their own company, where people can't talk to other people. Like they have people who've been Palantirians, quote unquote, from the beginning. So they're like infallible, so that if someone new comes in and says, hey, I have a better idea how to do this, or we should be looking into this, they get swatted down saying, who are you to tell me? I've been doing this longer than you have, right? I've been here since the beginning. that kind of business operation is why you miss a lot of the big opportunities that come around. And so, like I said, right now, Palantir, for the life of me, I don't know why they haven't opened up their platform to some of the changes that need to be made in order to grow their business. And I think that's the problem that Palantir has. I think their technology is good. I've looked over it. I think at this point it's a problem with execution.
But you're not buying Snowflake, right?
I am actually, after this earnings, considering starting a DCA position in Snowflake. That one and Datadog, because they have some really cool products and they have great execution. They've got market leadership behind it, right? And their valuations have come down to a point where it actually does make sense in investing in them for the long haul.
Would you actually be able to, because you could barely buy some puts on Palantir and stomach it? Like, would you be able to take money out of it and put it into those?
I had 50 puts, bro. It wasn't a small amount.
You said it was a small amount, or it wasn't?
No, it wasn't a small amount. It was almost 50 puts. Like,
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. You couldn't stomach that, right? So like, how could you stomach buying Snowflake over Palantir, knowing?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. You mean because it's $100 stock?
It's like no, it's not even that. It's more so like, I feel like you, like all of us, have a little bit of an emotional connection with Palantir, and if you could barely buy puts over the weekend because you were afraid of what might happen, like, would you be able to buy other competitors to Palantir just because you believe in their management over Palantir?
Yeah, of course. Because at the end of the day, there could be multiple winners. No one is saying that Palantir is the only winner, or Snowflake is the only winner, or Databricks is the only winner. You know, you can have multiple winners in an industry that's so young right now. Like, literally,
this is a very young industry. And I think the thing that needs to be recognized, though, is that this is truly only the second inning for Palantir. The first inning was the first 14 years when they were developing the software that they were using to get into the Department of Defense and stuff of the like. And they've only truly just started hiring salespeople. And we already saw in Q1 that their revenue in U.S. commercial and everything of the like was over 100% increase in customer count and revenue just in one quarter alone, year over year. So, and that's just by hiring a few salespeople, right? Now that they're actually starting to ramp up, I think you're going to see a very different magnitude of revenue growth coming through the company. We've seen continued sales come in. The contract that was just released, I forget what it was you covered it.
It was the Army Research Labs
$99.9
million contract. And I still don't believe that they've announced all the contracts for the year that are the big game changers that they were kind of looking for. So I completely understand why they have the 25% growth in the sale, or sorry, just the employees in general. But you look at the net dollar retention of any of these. So that now you've increased the amount of customers that you have substantially quarter over quarter, and the net dollar retention from those customers is over 100% year over year. That means not only are they retaining their customers, but they're also gaining revenue from each customer that they had last year, on the order of, depending on if it's a U.S. government contract or U.S. commercial contract, 30 to 50% year over year. I mean, that's pretty substantial. It goes to show you why they need to increase headcount. And 25% seems like a lot, but if you looked at Google year over year from Q2 to Q2, they went from 142,000 to like 172 or 175,000. That's a 20% increase year over year. So. Yeah. I like the fact that they're investing through the cycle, right? Companies that are in good financial shape invest through the cycle. They don't have a lot of debt, if any, to have to worry about. So they don't have to maintain anything like that. Investing through the cycle is and you said it earlier, Chris. I mean, investing through the cycle is prudent in an environment where everyone else is pulling back. But I do like the thought process of what you were saying about Glassdoor and stuff like that. I haven't heard anything like that. From what I saw working with these guys, they're very open to not only just listening to each other, but also the client. And they completely just like sit there and they're, literally just say, how can we help you? Right? Not here's an off the shelf product for you to use.
Let's get into that, Matt. first of all, can you describe what your day job is and how you work with Palantir, and then your experience with working with them?
For sure. So I work deep water Gulf of Mexico. I'm a, I guess by trade, petroleum engineer by education.
What does
So
petroleum engineer mean?
petroleum engineer, basically, there's a multitude of different things that you can do, but basically, in a nutshell, work with geologists that kind of understand where oil formations are and figure out the best way to develop them. And what I focus on is reservoir engineering, which kind of understands how much volume is really there and how to best develop it. And then there's also kind of production engineer, petroleum engineer side, which makes the efficiency of getting it out of the ground as efficient as possible. So there's kind of a multitude of different ways you can look at it. But the thing that we use Palantir for most, and I forget exactly when I started working with them, 2015 or 2016, is really for the time series data to go into Foundry. So I don't work in Apollo, I don't work in Constellation, any of that other stuff that's brand new that the Army and stuff is using. I'm using strictly Foundry. And the cool thing that's awesome is like you could literally, just like you're on Google, think about how you're searching up like social media stuff. You want to watch a video of Amit, I can search up data, right? Where it's streaming from, particular reservoirs and stuff like that I'm managing. I can look up the data and it streams just like you would stream this live stream itself. It's streaming the data and I can read it on a visual tool, and just like Excel would be, like you can kind of use Excel to kind of change your axes and stuff of the like. But with Palantir, it's live data. Excel is very clunky when you try to pull in live data. It crashes very easily. It's not as maneuverable. Whereas Palantir is set up to basically have an operating system centered around data. So just like you're using either a Mac or a Microsoft PC for specifically trying to either, you could do work on it, Excel, Microsoft Suite, stuff of the like, but you could also use it to go on YouTube and stuff like that. Palantir, the Foundry platform, is literally centered around an operating system for data. So instead of me looking at like videos and stuff on YouTube, I'm focusing on how to dive into data, do analytics. Sometimes I connect it through a token into Power BI to be able to create visuals that I can give to executives so they can look on their phones, stuff like that. And it's an interesting experience because it's evolved since we kind of started with them in 2016 to what I use it for now. And my role has changed. I did some expat locations, and my role working it from there as well changed. But it's interesting and it's very versatile compared to, say, like a PowerPoint or an Excel, right?
Is it very user friendly, like just using it?
I would say you need some coaching. But the thing that was, I guess, most beneficial was once you kind of understand where to go, like you can search for data extremely simply. Like it's a client relationship where you're basically like, this is what we want to name this stream of data, have a description for it. And so if you're like, I want to look up X well on X platform in the Gulf of Mexico, which is 200 miles offshore, you can do that really simply. So like I moved to a new asset recently working with one of our competitors, but we have joint venture projects that we do with them as well. And I was like, okay, let me start looking at some of the data. And it wasn't like I had to have somebody come in and be like, okay, Matt, like here's where this well's data is and here's where this well's data is. It's like, no, I just literally log on to Palantir, like our operating system for Palantir, go through Google Chrome. And I literally just search up. I'm like, well, I know this well is named X. So I type in that well and I'm like, I want to look at the pressure for XYZ. And I can pull it up and I'm like, okay, cool. How much oil is it making a day? Okay, cool. What are we actually like on a daily basis allocating for that? Okay, cool. Is it making water? What's the water cut? And I can literally pull all that up, create a report. And if I want to, I can be like, send it to me at 8 a.m. every morning. And it'll stream that data consistently over the course of, it depends on how often that pressure gauge or temperature gauge takes data, but then I can have it send it to me the next morning at 8 a.m.
Do you think other companies can do that, or do you feel like there's something unique to Palantir doing that?
The thing was unique to me using Palantir, and this kind of goes back to 2015, 2016, is like I work in oil and gas, so a lot of people try to sell you on things like our product is better, right? use this tubing string or this casing string compared to this casing string. Somehow your steel is better than somebody else's. I came in and they were more interested on how they could help me get to an answer, not, hey, we have this off the shelf product to feed you. So that way, like, we could just sell it to you and walk down the road and go find somebody else to sell it to. They honestly sat with us for over a year, working with those guys for over a year. They would show up to our office every week. They would cycle people in and out, be like, what are you using this for? Sitting there asking, what if you had any opportunity to optimize, where would you optimize? And that was unlike anything. I've never sat with a Microsoft employee since I've started working 9-10 years ago. I never sat with an Amazon Web Service employee. I've never sat with, you know what I mean? Like, it was literally the Palantir guys that literally sat at my desk and they were like, I was like, okay, what presentation do you have? They're like, we don't have a presentation. We want to know what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to get your job done. And we want to build a software around that. And that was completely different comparatively to what we do. Like Microsoft, it's already installed at our desks. And like, so that was what made me be like, these guys are dope. The guys that I talked to were dope. If these guys ever go public, I'm buying shares. So I was I didn't want to just be a stakeholder in their success. I wanted to be a shareholder in their success. So it was a lot of money at the time, but I bought, 1,000 shares at $10 when they direct listed, and I've consistently bought more. I think I'm up to like 3,300 or 3,400 shares. So
you said that's $10,000, right? You said it was a lot of money at the time. I'm assuming because at that time 10,000 was a lot for you, but since you've been doing well for yourself.
It was, yeah. Well,
right?
it was always still a small position of the portfolio. I'm trying to think in 2020. Yeah, 2020, late September, 2020. It was a small position. Like it was less than 2% of the portfolio.
And did you sell any at 45?
No. Sold a lot of covered calls though. Yeah, a lot of covered calls. And I was afraid because I think I had like a $38 or $40 covered call. I'd have to go back and check. And I was afraid it's going to get called away. But it was a big spike up, right? It went from like 38 to 45 in a day, and then it came back down within the next day or two.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting stuff. Well, thank you for sharing. Chris, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you a few questions. Number one, did you use any other data science product? I say at the end of the day, that's what it is, right? We're migrating to data science. We're going from small to big, right? So with everyone that asks, what does Palantir do? This is exactly what Palantir does. Exactly what Matt just explained, right? They take data that back in the day used to be able to be small data, or there wasn't that many things that generated data. So it's us in the hospital. Let's say we had an MRI machine, and we would look at the total number of patients that are done on a daily basis. Every day, it's like, oh yeah, we do 7 patients on Monday, 7 on Tuesday, 8 on Wednesday, 9 on Thursday, blah, blah, blah. And we look at it over historical average and we say, you know what, this is how many people we could do. Now, when you're looking at data and you're looking at it relatively small, that's literally just one, like maybe a dozen or more rows on a spreadsheet. But if you want to go super granular, if you want to look at things in much more detail and you want to look at a data from an entire decade, right? Or something that's specifically like different demographics or different other things, that's where Excel no longer functions. That's where we need big data to come in and do what they do. So like, as an example that Matt just said, he has a live streaming sensor that's feeding into a database or a data warehouse that's literally Palantir is querying from and saying, hey, this is what's going on live, and being able to present it on a chart that's real time, that's giving him the data. So there are definitely other companies out there that are doing the same thing. So if you look at Snowflake does that, but they do it in a structured format. And then you have Databricks. Databricks does that with unstructured data. So there's a lot of things that are happening. And I'm telling you, this industry is still very, very small compared to where it's going in the future. If your business or organization is not being realigned to a data-centric approach where you're making decisions not based on based on like what's the word?
Intuition.
Rather than based on data, then yeah, that's what you need, because your competitors are going to be doing the same thing. Right now, you as a business owner, let's say Amit, you know that there are more viewers, watching Audias at 8 o'clock at night versus others that may be watching at 6 a.m. in the morning, right? So what you're going to be doing is making sure that you hire people for the 8 o'clock to be managing that workload, right? So that if Audia goes down at 8 o'clock, there'll be someone to address it. Whereas 6 o'clock, you may not
Which
need a
happened
person.
on Saturday. There was a big
Yeah.
spike in the database for an hour and a half, and it was just dead. And I caught it the last 10 minutes. And so we built something this week to like send us an email internally as soon as the shit hits the fan.
Right.
But yeah, it's a big deal knowing that data, right?
Now, what program are you using to? I was just about to say, like, I can set up email alerts on any. We call them tags, but it's really just like a data sensor.
Yeah.
But if it goes to 0 or you set a certain threshold, so I'm just curious what.
So we use AWS in the back end, but it was so simple for my CTO to just set it up, because we just never had one of those major outages for an hour. So we're like, this can't happen again where we don't know about it,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, and so people have asked, why aren't you building Audio on Foundry? I just don't think we have enough data yet. Foundry, you actually do need a lot of data to be able to really internalize and make data driven decisions. Along with, you have to apply for Foundry for builders, so it's a bit of a process. I do think once the platform scales, I would love to be able to use something that optimizes, right? Because if you can optimize the shit you're building, you make better decisions, you make more money.
Mm-hmm.
Another piece of big news right here, Chris. I don't know if you heard about this. You probably did. Ex-DoD data chief data officer David Spirk joins Palantir. So David Spirk, former chief data officer at the Department of Defense, has joined Palantir as a senior counselor. This comes after Palantir set up a federal advisory board. Palantir also got another guy that I'm forgetting his name a couple of weeks ago we talked about, that is now joining them as a senior counselor in their governmental business, who also used to work I believe for some part of the Air Force, but I'm forgetting the guy's name. More people leaving the Pentagon, leaving the government to work for Palantir. Any thoughts, Matt? Chris, we'll start with you, then Matt, on why these people are joining Palantir and if this is good for us.
So this goes right back to what I was saying a few months back. It's not what you know, it's who you know in the government contracting space, right? If you look at any major tech companies that are specifically trying to get business from DoD and any government organizations, they're all somewhat relying on these people who have inside connections to things that are going to be able to push contracts their way, right? So this is not anything new. The only difference is that normally a lot of DoD officials, they typically go, and especially like retired 4-star generals and 3-star generals, they all get jobs at Lockheed Martin. They all get jobs at Northrop Grumman. Hell, the current the current Secretary of Defense used to work for Raytheon, right? So if the goal for Palantir is to become the next software prime, guess what? They're going to need to hire key decision makers in the Pentagon or former key decision makers into Palantir. So the current people who are in that role, they're secure for the future, because after a certain amount of years of service, that's what everyone does when it comes to getting higher up in the government space. Once you get enough experience up there, guess what happens? These large contractors will come and hire you, right? So it's almost like, hey, do me this favor while you're in office so that I guarantee you a job in the future, right? And you're going to use your connections that you made while you were in the service to push more contracts our way. It's a dirty business, but it exists and people use it. It's a revolving door. It's a revolving door.
I agree. No, I agree with what Chris said. I mean, I think what you're probably seeing a lot of is, I'm not saying that technology hasn't been around. It's just maybe the form of the technology that Palantir started using in 2003 really wasn't around prior to that, right? I mean, Palantir was developed to be able to help the U.S. government back in 2003, and was really the only, I guess, client that they really had up until probably the 2012, 2013 timeframe, when they actually started going towards commercial. And so I think that these people have probably developed those relationships, and exactly what Chris had said, it's now an opportunity for them to retire with their pensions from the DoD or the Army or the Navy or wherever they were using it, get their full pensions, and then also move into a place where they can couple their experience and also make a dollar and continue to feel like they're adding value and helping their buddies that they may have left in charge at the DoD or something of the like, right?
Yeah, and there's inside keywords sometimes that these guys know to say in order to get the contract done, right? So they'll have the inside loop on a project. Because right now, let's say you're in the Department of Defense, you're the 3-star general. You know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. So you know where the Army is focusing all of their attention, where the Navy is focusing their attention. So the minute Palantir hires you and Palantir says, "Hey, I think this is a good product," this guy can actually come and tell you, like, no, that's not where the Army or Navy are headed. Don't go that route. Go this route and you'll get that giant contract. So guess what? Right now, Palantir is broken into the market. They're doing exactly what they need to by getting people who had influential roles in both the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and now the Biden administration, and capitalizing, right? So that now you have insiders who can give you the inside loop on how to do it. It's almost like let's say you were working at a car dealership. I know I keep using the analogies of cars, but if you look at someone who worked formerly at a car dealership, they can give you all the inside tips on what to say when you go buy a car so that you get the best deal possible, right? They'll say, "Hey, don't buy this product because that's a bullshit product that they're trying to sell you or they're upcharging you on, or you need this or that." Like right now, there's so many industries where if you know an insider, like a person who's an industry insider, you'll get a much better deal than something that if you were going completely blind with,
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
I mean, it's like hands down, like if I were unfortunately to lose my job in oil and gas, I'd probably try to apply to Palantir and be like, "Hey, how can I help you guys in any sort of shape or form in the oil and gas sector?" Right? I know you have a few clients already, and I could be able to help with that, right? Yes, they sat with me for a year to understand, but they were looking at from the data lens, and I was still working on it from the day-to-day operational lens. I could provide that perspective for them, and that would be extremely crucial for them to be able to continue to dominate in an oil and gas market where, who knows, maybe Snowflake is trying to jump into, or Datadog. Honestly, I don't know what the market share is for that, but Palantir's continue to do well in the oil and gas market. And I think, me being in addition to that might help them in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and that's a key thing right there, where anytime you have people who worked with your product in an industry, they will be your biggest advocates, right? And they'll be your evangelicals that you need in order to go and sell this product to other people in that same industry. So even if it's Matt's competitor, they're having the same exact challenges that Matt probably has right now. So all of Matt's competitors, guess what? If Matt was able to solve it at his company and then gets hired by Palantir, and the root cause of the problem was identified by Palantir and solved by Palantir, he can go and say, "Hey, listen, are you guys having a problem of I don't know, chewed up drill heads?" Well, guess what? Palantir was able to identify them before they went bad, and we had all these days of outage, and we were able to determine whether or not we should replace the drill heads before they went bad, rather than waiting until after. "Oh, really? How did they do that?" "Well, let me show you." And then they could bring in some engineers from Palantir and show do so on and so forth. It happens to me too in healthcare. Like I work in healthcare, I can tell you I've had people reach out to me and say, "Chris, what do I do in order to um, optimize my product so that other hospitals want to actually buy it because I don't have anyone in a clinical role on my team?" And then that's where people like me would come in saying, "You know what? I used your product, right? So I probably am the best person that can speak to your product to other hospitals out there." So I'm not saying Palantir, but I'm saying other softwares, because we in healthcare we work with hundreds of softwares.
Yeah. Okay, last thing I want to talk about for today. I found this article. Well, actually, Gabe, one of my patrons, sent this to me, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it brings up an interesting point. So a lot of the defense stocks kind of went wild this week. Nancy Pelosi, Taiwan, Russian state TV says North Korea offering Kremlin 100,000 volunteers, i.e., soldiers, to help with Ukraine. Now, the Kim Kardashian, Pete Davidson thing is a little bit more interesting to me, but nonetheless, this is kind of crazy, right? Now, we don't know if this is really true because it's Russian state TV, but if North Korea were to give Russia 100,000 quote unquote volunteers in order to stop or aid them in the Ukraine crisis. You have two dictatorial regimes basically working together, and you have this like new world order that is starting where Russia's like not giving up in terms of their pursuit of hegemony. Now, Palantir seems like one of the stocks to own, especially with China launching these missiles in Taiwan and all this. Not, like you would think that's the company that would help America and individualism and freedom and Western values win. Because if that shit doesn't win, the whole world is screwed. And you would think you should own Palantir. So how do you guys feel about the recent stuff going on geopolitically and how that impacts Palantir?
That's a good one.
Chris, we'll start with you because I know Chris can talk for days.
Okay, very good.
It's super bullish for Palantir, right? Right now, if you look at the other competitors that I named, Snowflake and Databricks and stuff, they don't nearly have the same level of presence that Palantir does, with a huge history going back 2 decades, right? So out of all the companies that are in big data science that have an affiliation to the military, Palantir's got the lead on that. So when it comes down to it, people ask me, what's my bull case for Palantir? Well, my bull case is that they're so heavily involved in the government, especially the defense side. Defense spending is going to get ramped up like crazy for the next 10 years. We're not talking about fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan anymore. We're talking about fighting giant super economies. That means the more data that you have means that the better decisions you can make to defeat those giant adversaries, right? So I think Palantir for the next 10 years is very, especially their Gotham side is going to do very well. I think there was a point where you could have argued that Gotham may not grow as much anymore when Afghanistan, all that ended. But then guess what? The Russians stepped up, and now the Chinese have stepped up, and geopolitically, it just makes sense to have Palantir as a key weapon in the future to understand your enemy. I mean, if you understand your enemy, you can make actual plans in order to defeat them. If you don't understand your enemy, their tank movements, their intentions, then you're behind the ball, in which case you're fighting a losing battle. So no, you definitely need Palantir, and I think their government business is going to do very well for the next 10 years, and maybe even into the future, further than that.
Yeah, I agree wholly with that. I remember watching one of the interviews that Karp had, I think right around or right after the Russian invasion kind of started, and he was like, I could have told you this months ago. Obviously, I couldn't, right, because of what was going on. But they had the intelligence, and I agree wholly with Chris. When you have these geopolitical tensions, they probably know, what's already happening in China and how it's leaning. And to be very frank, I mean, when things were going on in February and March, early March timeframe, I was like, oh, this is going to be just a little scuffle. It's going to be like when they took Crimea back in 2015. It's not going to be that long. And here we are, going on 6 months later, and it's continued to be and worsening in Ukraine and what's going on with the Russia invasion. So I agree. I think that we're in a new wave of kind of more like a Cold War. So globalization is kind of like coming to a halt to an extent, and we're continuing to split up, which hasn't really been seen since maybe the late 80s, early 90s with the fall of the wall. So I think it's a new sort of Cold War that I think a lot of people knew was kind of coming over the past 5 years. And I think honestly it's here, and very much what Chris said. I think that Palantir is extremely crucial as an ally to not only the US government, but also European governments during this time, as we saw Karp go to Ukraine and hang out. And not hang out, but obviously like see how they can help the Ukrainian government in any sort of way, shape, or form. And I think he was one of the first CEOs to go ahead and do that. And I think we'll continue to see that as, things aren't right. I mean, with Russia, people, and specifically from oil and gas perspective and the supply chain perspective, I look at, people freaking out over the oil price specifically, but we've seen the partnership that Russia now has with China by selling the Chinese super cheap oil, and same thing with India. India's kind of playing Switzerland in this case, where they're saying, well, we're not really for it, we're not really against it, but we'll buy the oil from Russia. And we're continuing to see those tensions that, while might not necessarily be said, are definitely increasing, and Palantir is definitely necessary in that world.
Yeah, and Palantir is getting a huge benefit during the wartime. They're getting their software battle tested. They're able to work out all the bugs, right now in a live scenario. I cannot tell you how important it is for software that you develop to go from theoretical to actual, right? There's a huge difference right now. Which other company in 5 years from now is going to say we were able to help the Ukrainians during a war? Wars don't come very often, and people don't necessarily want to adopt software during a wartime scenario. Palantir has a perfect opportunity to get their software battle tested and battle hardened and battle ready, so that in the future, when you are trying to make a sales pitch why you need to have more meta constellation services, you can say, well, guess what? We were telling the Ukrainians and NATO where every tank regiment was stationed from a satellite 1,000 miles, 100 miles in the sky, and we were able to tell them exact where those tanks were at any given moment, at any given time, so that you were able to draw battle plans and actually make actionable decisions sitting in the Pentagon.
I think that the geopolitical stuff Matt brought up is very important. That's also a good point, Chris. Like, mission critical situations means your software has to be mission critical and tested, and a war is the best time for that to be tested. And wars don't happen often, and when they do happen, then you got to test it for the future war that's inevitably going to come. The past 20 years has been more globalized than ever, right? We as an entire planet, we've decided that commerce, technology has enabled all this stuff. Things can work better if everyone uses the same stuff and uses products and does trade and all this stuff. And it's unleashed trillions of dollars of wealth. But in between that, we still have issues. So, for example, Google, you would say the most amazing companies in the world, it's organized the world's information, is banned in China. Facebook banned in China. So even though the world is globalized and this one website has connected the entire world, China has taken, and I think that they're banned in Russia too, right? These dictatorial regimes have stopped the globalization to some extent. So going to your point, Matt, eventually, if you don't believe in freedom of speech, you don't believe in individual values, you're not going to just stick around and be like, we'll just let the United States and their values and the West and Europe just win over time. I mean, you're gonna fight back. And that might be an invasion of Taiwan, invasion of Ukraine. That might be something really bad. And the United States is going to need something to protect against that. We have a new guest who came in just before we're ending.
At the Players Lounge, man. The Players Lounge.
You guys, how are you doing?
Good. How are you in your lounge for your first class flight that you're about to catch?
Yeah, I'm in a lounge, but it's not a first class flight, guys.
Okay. Are you drinking chai, correct?
Yeah, cafe latte.
Okay, cafe latte, nice. We're about to end up in like 10 minutes, but Sachin, any thoughts you had about what we were talking about today and what's going on with Palantir?
I think why don't you ask the questions based on the discussions you guys had, and then let me chip in, because I don't know what has been discussed today. I think it's better that some of the things which have left undiscussed or maybe hanging in the middle, then I can chip in on that.
I guess the biggest thing is we were talking about everything going on with Nancy Pelosi, Taiwan, and how do you feel that's going to affect Q2 earnings? Do you have any specific numbers you think we're going to get on revenue? How do you feel the stock's going to perform? Anything, I guess, for a preview of Monday you think is going to happen?
So I was thinking like earlier that if a stock managed to cross the levels of 12 or 13, then it might likely fall. I mean, because then it will be quite a run before the earnings. I mean, and normally we have seen that a stock generally falls after earnings, but it hasn't risen that much. It only has risen as much every stock since, especially in the high growth category, since the recovery, what we have seen from the Q2 lows. So I'm not certain at this point whether stock is going to decline. But if there's a upside surprise earning, if we see like they eventually touch like 500 million in revenue, that particular time I would see that we might see a rush in the pre-market hours. Will be a good time to sell actually covered calls when the market opens, in my opinion. Let's see how it opens.
That would be my plan. Yeah.
Sachin, what do you feel about the 25% hiring?
I think I'm very positive. Even when I was having discussion with my friends in Palantir, I said, guys, if you ever decide to hire somebody in Singapore and Southeast Asia, just give me a call. I would love to join.
You can't do the podcast with us anymore if you do join.
No, but you know what? They need people like Sachin who actually are insiders that are going to be able to not only give them the opportunity to network with people in the industry, but also what to say to get into the rooms in order to make that sales pitch. I think that's one of the things. I don't know if Palantir has really hired people outside of their technical side, and instead hired some industry people to do their sales for. You know, and even if they have, like I said, I don't know what their sales force looks like and like how they're structuring their sales force. But if it was me, I would get industry people like Sachin, like Matt, who know the industry that they work in and are able to kind of like guide them on how to do better to get more clients.
I agree with Chris. See, in the starting, I think there was this. This was one of the big gap when they didn't have a sales force, that they were missing this kind of industry context. And I think B2B, this is important, that the relationship goes a long way. Somebody has to open door for you, especially in the middle and the lower level. Somebody has to tell you like what is the context of the problem solving here. I know that in energy sector they have hired people from energy background. I think one of my close acquaintance in Palantir is actually from an oil and gas sector who has joined recently. Not recently now, it's been like 9 months in US. And what I have seen is that there are more people coming outside developer community or like a software engineer background, which are joining Palantir now. And we have seen, like in the case of defense and healthcare, that they have hired people who are specifically not programmers but industry veterans. So, yeah, I mean, there is no other way to do it. I mean, if you see why AWS and Microsoft is so successful, is because they're hiring people from industry. They say, okay, we can teach you cloud cloud technologies, but we cannot learn like the industry in our day. So yeah, and this we have discussed this earlier as well, that there are three things which they need to get right in their go-to-market strategy. First thing is they need to figure out a low barrier entry thin tier, which you can target to a mid tier and a low tier kind of employees and solution that can be that's like no brainer buying, like something like Snowflake and Databricks has at this particular time. The second thing they need to get right is that the sales force has to be very industry focused. But and the third thing they need to get right is that they need to do, like if you see like Snowflake has their own certification, they have their own summit ongoing, and this is how you build community. So these are like three things they need to get it right, and I believe that as a company which has highest revenue across peers in this category for now, they should be doing it. Back to you guys.
Yeah, I would agree.
I know that Palantir is offering certifications as well, and I know that when you start looking at jobs for specifically Palantir, working at companies that have Palantir embedded in them, whether it's Foundry or others, they are looking for folks that are Palantir certified. And so I agree with you. You need to build that sort of sense of community and have those discussions. And I think Palantir's YouTube channel is doing a pretty good job of putting out those little couple minute videos of showing you how to implement it and how to kind of get up to speed on building, say, a database and a data lake to connect up to, which is some of the luxuries that we had done for us. But I'm sure somebody at the very beginning, at the very ground roots of where I work, had to go ahead and do that. And I'm just bearing the fruits of the labor.
I agree with Matt. I mean, I totally agree with Matt. I mean, the tool is only as good as the problem it solves, and the problem will only be solved when it's in more and more people. Okay, a lot of time is technologies. I mean, the way they start or the way they initially intend and how people use it at the end of the day is very different. And can Palantir unlock that kind of access? I think that's pretty much like I said. But this is a difference between whether they are going to be a niche company or they are going to be a juggernaut. I mean, that question is still unanswered at this particular point. A company with a lot of potential, but still need to get some of their go-to-market strategy right. And yeah, the time is of essence. I mean, this opportunity is available now. Maybe it's available for another 6 quarters. It will not be available forever. Okay, back to you guys.
All right. Final, Chris, do you have any last thing to say? I was gonna say final estimates for. Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna ask Sachin something Sachin, what do you think about this hiring? Like literally on Friday they announced hiring. Why didn't they announce on earnings? Why did they hire? Why did they announce it Friday?
To be honest, timing on the hiring, I have no clue. Like why they decided, or somebody has just slipped in, or it was unplanned. I have no clue. Like why they did it on Friday. they definitely want to create a positive sentiment, and not only like sentiment. Like if you are going to hire 25% of workforce, you need to get the message out to the right people also. So that could also be a strategy, that why don't we send a message in the public that we are going to hire. A lot of companies are cutting hiring, so there will be a lot of smart people who will be still looking for quality jobs. So it will be a good message to pass out. Definitely a message for investors that we are looking for expansion, and expansion is going as per plan. Okay. But why not on earnings? And if I have to do it, I will do it outside earning as well, because then in earning, this kind of announcement just become a footnote. If it's done outside earning, it gets proper attention from media and everyone who is covering the company, and people actually talk about it. In the earning, the focus is so much on the numbers. So that's my personal view.
I think
I
that's
hope it
absolutely right.
answers.
I didn't even think about that. You're absolutely right. By mentioning during earnings, it ends up being a footnote. The fact that we're talking about it right now just goes to show that actually that was the right move to actually announce it outside of earnings, so that people can get buzzed, and the drum beat for it is more loudly, like it goes out there, right? Whereas if they had announced it during earnings, it could have just been a footnote, in which case people would have
Right.
ignored it. And other people, even if they were trying to look for a new job, they would have just been like, oh yeah, Palantir, whatever, you know. Whereas now, literally around what time did it come out? Around 10 o'clock this morning, everyone
Yeah.
was talking about it. Everybody, you know.
And just to put in context, 25% people they are about to hire. It is more than the total number of employees some of the peers they have. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
All right.
what I'm going to be
My
looking
bad.
for is definitely for Q1 continued U.S. customer growth over 100%, like we had in Q1 versus Q4. Net dollar retention hopefully being in the 120 to 130% range. So continuing to get more and more action from the customers that they do get in the door, and also just continued revenue growth. I'm thinking they're going to probably close in on 500 million, and not this quarter, but maybe next. And also be keeping an eye on gross margins as well, to kind of see with the continued hiring that they're going to be doing, is their I guess main number for gross margins continue to take a hit. It's around 80% now. Is it going to dip into the low 70s with all this hiring that they're doing? But coupling that as well is I anticipate they're just going to get more customers through the door. So I'm truly just looking to see how they're going to hit their stride now that they're truly focusing on getting the product out there, where they haven't been for the past several years.
I agree. I agree with. I think one thing which I'll be looking probably in this earning or next earning or sometime, I think it's time to release a new product. Okay, something which is very focused, very thin, and yeah, I think that can help companies, especially in the kind of scenario we are. So that will be interesting. For a long time, I have seen that they had this products for some of the companies which we call like Foundry carbon module. I'll be I'll be very excited if Palantir can release something related with the climate regulation and monitoring and carbon module as a very focused product to a large number of companies, because everyone needs it at this particular point. And like I've discussed in past, like Foundry for carbon module or carbon or climate could be as big as market than any of their product, and maybe even bigger given the energy transition sentiment and the macro we are currently in. Back to you guys.
Yeah, and for me, I want to see them release more of a more of the video, like, so the videos that they have, they're good videos, but you also need to have a free tiered version so people can try them out, and people who aren't Palantir clients or data science people that don't have a Palantir affiliation can get certified in Palantir, so that just in case in the future, when you're out there looking for a developer that's able to utilize Palantir, that there's actually a vast pool of people that can actually do it. So if you look at Databricks right now, Databricks offers certifications and training. That's what I think is another area that I hope Palantir discusses this time around, because Coach Strap said it. They need a developer community that's willing and able to build on top of that data architecture that Palantir has.
When we talk about self-service capabilities, messaging to low to middle tier employees, especially low tier openings, I think Palantir has a lot to learn from companies like Snowflake and Databricks. I think there is no question about that. where Palantir shines actually when it comes to solve really complex problem in a very short time. So at least at this particular time, what is happening is that given the macro, I think there will be more and more incumbent companies, especially companies which have a longer working capital cycle, okay, like mining or like energy, where when you invest money for a 7 or 8 year plan, and then suddenly macro changes, and all the numbers and investment decisions you have made is suddenly thrown in a disarray. So these are the kind of companies I think they'll be using more and more Palantir in this time. So I would say, I mean, it's a time to capture large market, and especially in the industries where a lot of disruption and a lot of uncertainty at this particular time is happening. Back to you guys.
One last thing, Sachin, before, what do you think of Alex Karp as the CEO? When I did deep
What
dives
type of
into
fucking
other
question
companies.
is that, bro?
No. It's a valid question. It's a valid
One last
question.
thing. What do you think about the entire CEO?
It's a valid question. Should Alex Karp remain as the CEO, or should they look for another CEO that has more experience executing?
So I would say Alex Karp should stay CEO for two reasons. Okay, I think I see your point. I mean, you are looking him as a CEO who has kind of a relationship with the commercial world and do more selling. I agree on that part. I think he's improving on that. I know this from one of the recent CEO meetings he had with another CEO. The second part is, see, given the kind of company they are and the kind of attention that company has got in last 3 4 years because of ICE, because of Peter Thiel, it's not easy for a Wall Street CEO to take that kind of pressure. Okay, he actually, not only he was able to take the pressure, he was able to actually articulate it well, because the company is all about its mission. Okay, numbers are good, everything is fine, but the purpose and the mission is very important when you are looking to build a next generation company. So he was able to actually stay very strong on that part. I see, Chris, your point, and I agree with that, is that when it comes to do more like commercial selling and being in a Wall Street mode, doing that, definitely I think there is a scope of improvement. I think this is where I think probably Sham can probably take a bigger role as a CEO. Okay, but I would love to see Alex as a CEO. Okay, it's not an easy company, and it is going to get a lot of flack in the coming days also. I mean, the way US politics is diverging from each other, I think companies who are in the middle, or companies who have target from one party or other party, is it's going to be really interesting time for them.
Yeah, I
Back
would
to you.
say this is one reason why I think there needs to be some change where Palantir gets divided into commercial and government. I'm always going to advocate for that, because
Chris,
this
that's a
way,
horrible idea.
no, it's not a horrible idea. All right, you can't. Lockheed Martin can't be like, oh yeah, let me start selling to selling other things like
Why?
commercial jetliners. No, when
Why?
you're in when you're in one industry, you should focus on that industry. When you're focused on another one, you should focus on another when it comes to government versus commercial. I'm telling you right now, if they were to do that, they hire someone who's good at commercial sales and divide that company into Palantir, the commercial version, and then another one that does nothing but government contracting and defense. I think that they could do very well with two different companies rather than one. But that's just my opinion.
I
See, I
think
think
I think if you do that, you might lose the culture that a lot of people enjoy at Palantir in general. And I
Matt, most of
personally,
that culture is gone. Most of that culture, the minute that they DPO'd, you have to see the amount of turnover that they have. There's very few people that were the original Palantirians that started all the way in 2003, 2010 that are still around. Trust me, their entire focus is shifting, but they're still trying to keep their legacy of defense with their CIA contracts to be also part of their commercial side as well. And I don't see that being a positive. I see that as holding them back from making the decisions that they need to in order to make two successful companies rather than one company that can't find what is going to be the route that they want to go. It's literally, and that's the other thing. It breeds competition between them. So now you have Gotham and you have Foundry both competing against each other, for resources.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm gonna reach out to some of my buddies that I worked with starting back in 2015, 2016, and see what they think, because one of them I think pretty much was destined to climb up in the organization. He did a really good job with us, and it really kind of kicked off the U.S. commercial side of their business. So, yeah, I'll be reporting back when I have a good conversation with them.
Yeah, even they call themselves PG. Look it up. PG, and I think the other one is Metropolis. That was the other one that they had, right? Well, they had Gotham and they had Metropolis. But like I said, everything is fallen under one umbrella. I think this is a good time to divide it up into two different businesses and capitalize from there.
Okay.
See, my view is that the division, if it happens, it should happen when the revenue is 20 billion a year. I think at this particular point is better to go all guns blazing. And given like, I mean, whatever we understand of the philosophy of the company, uh, and given the founder share structure, I don't think that's going to happen. Okay, at least for now. Okay, I mean, like, before a company breaks, most of the time the CEO ended up sitting in front of Senate. Nobody has ever called Alex Karp in the Senate yet.
All right. So Monday, we're gonna go through everyone. Yes or up or down. Stock price after earnings, 4 p.m. Monday, August 8th. Above, let's just call it 11. Above 11, below 11. Sachin.
I would say by the time we finish the day, it will be above 11. It could be 12 or 13 in my opinion, because I was expecting it to rise more. But again, I mean, like, this is just hunch at this point. But definitely, I mean, if I have to take a 90% scenario for me, I would say it will close above 11 after that day.
Matt.
I'm gonna be wrong, but I'm with Sachin. I think it's gonna get to above 12.
Chris.
11. I think it's gonna be pretty flat. Like maybe Monday it might spike up to 11. I don't know, maybe 12, 13, but by the end of the week it'll be back down to 11.
I think on Monday it will be above 11. I think we're getting above 11. I think we're getting above 11. I think we're
I thought it is gonna be what it is. So you just had
It's going to be above 11. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Before you leave, please, everyone, I know you guys enjoyed him. Subscribe to Matt Money's YouTube channel. You can see it on the screen right here. Amazing, amazing YouTube channel. Talks about a lot of stuff. Look at that beard. How can you not subscribe to that beard? All 200 of you, I would suggest giving it a chance. I just put it in the YouTube chat, and I'm pinning it right now. So it is the pinned message. Please give him a subscribe. He was awesome to join us today, give us his insights on working with Palantir. I'm sure he'll be back again. And I think people definitely want you to be back again. So please
Thank you for
definitely
having me, man.
subscribe
Thank
to
you for
Matt.
having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. Daily Palantir audio content available on the app in the description of this video. So if you guys want to check out some Palantir audio content on the new startup that I launched that's rooted around audio content, please download that app and type in Daily Palantir, and you'll find a bunch of Daily Palantir content in audio format. All right, that's pretty much it. Great stuff today. Chris, your takes were great. It kept us trying to figure out how do we protect our thesis with you trying to stab it with a knife, and overall really fun.
Hey, Matt, it was great to have you on the podcast today. We hope to see you soon again, and hope many more episodes.
Yeah, thank you. Have a safe flight, man.
Matt, see if anyone from Palantir could come on this weekly podcast and join us, man. Even if they could just dispel my bullshit theories, I'd be all for it.
Yeah, I would. I'm going to reach out to my one buddy. Hope maybe I don't even know if he's still with the company. It's been a year or two since I reached out to him, but I need to give him a call. And hell, I would even love to have him on my channel, make a video or something. I need to give him a call. So you asked me some good, like you were discussing some good stuff. So I'm curious if what you're saying is true or if it's just an assumption.
Ask about my biggest thing. If you are going to ask him about advancement, like what the advancement picture looks like at Palantir. Because the chief complaint that I keep hearing from employees and seeing is that there's lack of opportunities to move up because they have a very flat structure, right? Mm-hmm. And basically, most of the founders and everyone else have a very dictatorial operational flow rather than getting people. So a lot of people are like, yeah, if you just want to do really good work, you want to work hard, but don't expect to move up very much. They don't have a hierarchy, right? And some people look for hierarchies so that this way they can constantly move up. With Palantir, you're literally where you are and you're going to stay there for a long period of time.
I'll ask because he definitely moved a good bit from client to client. And I think it was because at that point they were very small back in 2015, 2016. So I'll reach out to him.
All right,
Sounds
everybody.
good.
Thank you for joining. We'll see you next
Take
week.
care. Later.
Hey.